On the edge of Millersfield, a small town where the days drifted lazily and the streets whispered stories of long-forgotten days, an old Victorian house stood forgotten and weary. Its paint peeled like autumn leaves, and the windows glared with a dull, vacant stare. The house seemed suspended between past and present, holding its breath as if waiting for someone to awaken it from years of neglect. Emily Carter arrived as the sun dipped low behind the distant hills, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across cracked sidewalks. She stood outside the iron gate, her hand resting lightly on the worn wooden fence that bordered the property. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading blossoms, mingling with the faint aroma of aged wood and dust that clung to the house like a shroud. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Pregnant and alone, Emily's breaths came in steady, measured rhythms, though her heart thudded with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. Her silhouette was slender against the fading light, a young woman carrying the weight of a life growing inside her, and the burden of an uncertain future. The journey here had been long and quiet, each mile a step away from the crumbling life she had left behind. Just days earlier, everything had unraveled. After losing her job at the downtown bookstore, a job she had treasured for its small joys and familiar faces, Emily found herself adrift. The eviction notice pinned to her apartment door was the final blow, a cold announcement that she had nowhere left to turn. With no family nearby and friends scattered like leaves in the wind, she clutched at the fragile thread of an inheritance she barely remembered. A distant relative's house, left to her through a will she had learned of only after the fact. The house, her only refuge, was far from the comforting warmth she had once imagined. Its sagging porch groaned under the weight of years, and the garden was overrun with tangled weeds and wildflowers that had forgotten the touch of care. Yet, despite its derelict state, Emily felt something stirring inside her, a flicker of hope, fragile but persistent. She stepped past the gate, the gravel crunching softly beneath her boots, and pushed open the front door. It protested with a creak, sending a shiver through the porch's weathered boards. Inside, the air was heavy with silence, thick with the scent of mothballs and decay. Dust motes floated lazily in the fading light, swirling like tiny ghosts in the beams that slipped through grimy, cracked windows. The walls, once adorned with intricate wallpaper, now faded and peeling, seemed to lean inward, as if the house itself sighed under the weight of memories. The floorboards creaked beneath Emily's careful steps, each sound echoing in the cavernous rooms that stretched before her. A grand staircase to the left spiraled upward into darkness, its banister worn smooth by countless hands long gone. Emily's hand instinctively rested on her swollen belly as she moved deeper inside, the unfamiliarity of the space pressing down on her. Yet with each tentative step, the house seemed to whisper promises she couldn't quite grasp. It was a place of endings and beginnings, a threshold between the past she'd lost and the uncertain future awaiting her child. Despite the creeping chill, she found a spot near a dusty bay window and sank down slowly onto a threadbare armchair, worn and faded like everything else. The chair embraced her tired frame, offering a fleeting moment of comfort. Outside, the twilight deepened, shadows stretching and merging, blurring the edges of the world into a dim haze. Emily's mind drifted back to the moment she had received the letter from the estate lawyer, the official notice that the house was hers. She remembered the skepticism that had settled over her as she read the words, disbelief mingling with a desperate hope she hadn't dared to feel in months. It was a lifeline, fragile and uncertain, but it was something. In the quiet, she felt the first real stirrings of connection with the house, a tentative thread weaving between herself and the walls around her. She didn't yet understand what secrets the house held, but she sensed they were waiting beneath the surface, tucked away in shadows and silence, ready to be discovered. As darkness settled, Emily's gaze fell upon a narrow door tucked beneath the staircase. A door that seemed out of place, its wooden panels worn but solid, its handle tarnished with age. She reached out, fingertips brushing the cold metal, and a shiver ran down her spine. The door was locked, its secrets sealed tight. A mix of fear and curiosity fluttered in her chest. She didn't know what lay beyond that door, but she knew instinctively that it was important. Something about the locked basement whispered to her, a promise of answers, or perhaps new questions that would shape the days to come. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling loose shutters and carrying the faint sound of rustling leaves, as if the house itself was breathing, alive in its own quiet way. Emily sat back, the weight of her pregnancy heavy but steady, as she allowed herself to imagine what life might look like within these walls. For the first time in a long while, despite the uncertainty and the fear gnawing at the edges of her thoughts, Emily felt a spark of hope flicker inside her. She was here now, in this forgotten house on the edge of a fading town, standing at the threshold of something unknown. The road ahead was shadowed and unclear, but as the night deepened, she resolved to face it, one breath, one step at a time. 2 weeks earlier, Emily sat alone in the cramped apartment that had become a prison of peeling paint and faded curtains. The room was sparse, just a bed, a small kitchen table, and a few boxes of belongings she hadn't managed to sell. The eviction notice was pinned to the front door, a stark reminder of the deadline looming over her like a dark cloud. Her fingers trembled as she reread the letter from the bookstore. The words blurred as the weight of loss sank in. Position eliminated due to restructuring. The steady rhythm of her paycheck, the friendships forged over years, the sense of purpose, all vanished overnight. The pregnancy, once a quiet joy, had become an added layer of anxiety. Every kick from within her belly was a reminder of the life she was responsible for. Yet she felt unprepared, overwhelmed. Bills cluttered the kitchen counter, electricity, water, medical appointments, a mountain of numbers she couldn't climb. The severance pay had barely covered rent for 2 months, and with the eviction notice now taped to her door, she faced the terrifying reality of homelessness. Calls to shelters yielded long waits and uncertain futures, and friends offered sympathetic words but little help. She spent nights scrolling through job listings, each one a cruel reminder of doors closing. The pregnancy made many employers hesitant, and the physical strain left her exhausted before the day even began. She had sold nearly all her belongings, packing only the essentials into a battered suitcase. The few things she held dear, her grandmother's locket, a worn copy of her favorite novel, were tucked safely inside. On a rainy afternoon, a call from an unknown number brought a flicker of hope. The voice on the other end was that of a lawyer, informing her of an inheritance from a distant relative. Her great-aunt Mabel, a woman she barely knew. The house was theirs now, a place that might offer shelter and a fresh start. The address was unfamiliar, nestled on the outskirts of Millersfield, a town she remembered only faintly from childhood visits. The decision to leave the city was not made lightly. With her due date approaching and no place to call home, Emily packed what little she had left, her hands trembling as she locked the apartment door behind her for the last time. The drive was quiet, filled with a mix of apprehension and reluctant hope. The cityscape gave way to rolling hills and winding roads, the sky stretching wide and open above her. Arriving at the edge of Millersfield, the town's slow pace was a stark contrast to the relentless rush of city life. The Victorian house, looming at the end of a narrow lane, seemed to hold its breath beneath the gray sky. Emily parked her car beside the overgrown garden, the weeds brushing against the tires like silent sentinels. Inside the house, the silence was almost oppressive. Dust coated every surface, and the air smelled of damp wood and forgotten years. Emily moved carefully through the rooms, her footsteps echoing in the empty spaces. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing faded paint beneath, and the windows were streaked with grime. Yet, despite the decay, she felt a strange comfort in the stillness, a chance to rebuild from the ground up. She found a small room at the back, sunlight filtering through cracked blinds. It was here she decided to set up a corner for herself, arranging a modest bed and unpacking a few essentials. The walls, though scarred, held the promise of shelter, a place where she could rest and prepare for the arrival of her child. Loneliness settled in the quiet hours of the night. The house creaked and groaned, its ancient timbers shifting with the wind. Shadows played tricks on her tired eyes, and memories of harsher days lingered at the edges of her mind. Yet each morning brought renewed determination. She would clean, repair, and claim this place as her own, no matter how daunting the task. The basement door, locked tight and mysterious, became a fixation. Emily's curiosity grew with each passing day, the sense that something important lay hidden beneath the floorboards. She searched the house for keys, rifling through drawers and old furniture, but found nothing. Still, she returned to the door repeatedly, pressing her ear against it, wondering what secrets it held. Her body protested the work. The pregnancy weighed heavily on her, every movement a reminder of the life growing within. Fatigue was constant, and some nights she lay awake, heart pounding with worry for the future. Yet, the house seemed to offer a strange kind of solace, a shelter not just from the elements, but from the storm raging inside her. Neighbors were few and distant, their faces unfamiliar and wary. Emily hoped to find community here, but the town's slow rhythm and guarded nature made connection difficult. She longed for a friendly voice, a hand to hold, but learned to rely on her own strength. The house was her anchor, its creaking walls a steady heartbeat in the silence. One afternoon, as rain battered the windows, Emily discovered an old trunk in the corner of the living room, half hidden beneath a threadbare sheet. The wood was scratched and worn, the iron fittings rusted with age. She knelt beside it, fingers tracing the faded carvings along the lid. The trunk was locked, its key nowhere to be found, but it stirred something inside her, a link to the past, a promise of stories waiting to be uncovered. The days passed in a blur of cleaning, organizing, and small repairs. Emily patched holes in the curtains, scrubbed layers of grime from the kitchen sink, and cleared the garden of tangled vines. Each task wore her down physically, but gave her a sense of purpose. She was transforming this forgotten place into a home, brick by brick, breath by breath. Despite the hardships, Emily began to feel a tentative hope. The house was more than shelter. It was a new beginning. The locked basement, the hidden trunk, the faded wallpaper. They were pieces of a puzzle she was only beginning to see. Somewhere beneath the dust and shadows lay the story of this house, and perhaps the story of her own future. She clutched her belly as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. The uncertainty was still there, whispering in the corners of her mind. but so was a quiet strength. Emily had no illusions about the road ahead, but she was ready to face it, to build a life for herself and her child in this old house on the edge of Millersfield. The inherited home, with all its flaws and mysteries, was now her sanctuary. And as the night deepened, Emily closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine a future where hope could take root and grow, even in the most unlikely places. The morning light filtered weakly through the grimy windows, casting a pale glow on the faded wallpaper and dust-laden furniture. Emily stepped out of her small makeshift bedroom, her feet sinking slightly into the threadbare carpet that once might have been plush and warm. The house greeted her with silence, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood and the faint whistle of wind slipping through cracks in the aging walls. Her body moved deliberately, each step a measured effort against the heaviness that pregnancy imposed. The weight pressing on her belly was a constant reminder, and the sharp pangs of fatigue tugged at her as she made her way through the dim hallway. Her fingers brushed against the peeling wallpaper, tracing the delicate patterns that had long since faded into obscurity. The house was vast, echoing emptiness in its many rooms. Each space told a story of better days. Ornate moldings, chipped and worn, faded portraits hanging crookedly on walls, a fireplace cold and unused. Yet, beneath the layers of dust and neglect, Emily sensed a pulse, a life waiting to be stirred back to wakefulness. She began her exploration with cautious curiosity, moving from room to room, with a mixture of trepidation and hope. The parlor, once a place of warmth and gatherings, was choked with cobwebs and scattered debris. Broken glass glittered faintly on the floor, catching what little sunlight penetrated the grime. A grand piano stood silently in the corner, keys yellowed and cracked, as if holding its breath for a touch that might coax music from its depths once more. Emily's hands settled on the edge of a battered dining table, its surface scarred by years of use and neglect. She imagined the laughter and conversations that once filled the room, the clinking of glasses and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Now, only silence remained, thick and heavy, pressing down on her shoulders. The kitchen, tucked away at the back of the house, was a shadow of its former self. Rust crept over the edges of the sink, and the cabinets hung loosely on their hinges. Yet, it was here Emily felt the first flicker of possibility. She envisioned meals prepared for a child she had yet to meet, a family rebuilt from fragments of the past. Despite the house's eerie stillness, Emily felt the stirrings of determination. She began to clear away debris, sweeping dust and leaves from the floor, opening windows to let in fresh air. The labor was exhausting, her body protesting each movement. But with every sweep and scrub, the house seemed to breathe a little easier. Outside, the garden was a tangle of wild growth, the neat beds swallowed by weeds and unruly vines. Emily stepped out onto the creaking porch, the wood groaning beneath her weight, and surveyed the overgrown yard. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves was strong, mingling with the faint fragrance of forgotten flowers struggling to bloom. She imagined the garden as it might have been, vibrant and alive, bursting with color and promise. With careful hands, she began to clear a narrow path, pulling at stubborn roots and gathering fallen branches. The work was slow and tiring, but as the sun climbed higher, the space began to take shape, a quiet testament to resilience. Returning inside, Emily found solace in small routines. She brewed a cup of tea over the old stove, its flames sputtering to life after years of dormancy. The warmth seeped into her chilled fingers, grounding her in the moment. She sat by the window, watching the light dance on cracked panes, feeling the steady rhythm of her unborn child moving within. The house held secrets, and one door in particular drew her attention. The narrow, locked door beneath the staircase. It was an anomaly in the otherwise open space, a barrier to some hidden chamber below. Emily's curiosity gnawed at her, a quiet insistence that the basement was more than just a storage space. She searched the house for a key, rifling through drawers and cabinets, lifting loose floorboards, and peering behind faded paintings. Each day, the locked door beckoned, its cold metal handle cool against her skin. The questions it raised echoed in her mind. What lay beneath? What stories had been buried in darkness? One afternoon, as dusk approached, Emily sat on the creaky steps leading to the upper floors, her breath shallow but steady. The house seemed to settle around her, the fading light softening the edges of decay. She cradled her belly, feeling the flutter of life within, and whispered promises she barely dared to believe. "I'm going to make this work," she murmured, voice trembling but resolute. "For you and for us." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling dead leaves and sending a chill through the broken window panes. The house groaned, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo Emily's own weariness. Yet, amidst the shadows and silence, a spark of hope endured. She rose carefully, moving toward the locked door once more, her fingers brushing the cold handle. The basement held its secrets tightly, but Emily was determined to find the key, to unlock not only the door, but the past that had shaped this place. With a deep breath, she turned away from the door and toward the stairs, each step a small victory over the uncertainty that hovered like a storm cloud. The house was broken, but so was she, and both were waiting to be made whole again. The locked basement door lingered at the back of Emily's mind like a quiet whisper, a secret folded into the bones of the house. Each day, she found herself drawn to it, her fingers tracing the cold iron handle as if willing it to yield its mysteries. But the door remained steadfastly shut, its heavy wood resisting every tentative push. The house itself seemed to hold its breath around that door, the air thickening with a weight that pressed against Emily's chest. She felt the pull of something hidden, something important waiting beneath the floorboards. Yet, the key was nowhere to be found, and the lock mocked her futile efforts like an unspoken challenge. Determined not to be defeated, Emily began a methodical search for the key. She rifled through drawers and cupboards, lifting stacks of yellowed papers and rusted tins. The scent of old paper and dust filled the air as she sifted through forgotten relics of a life once lived. Each discovery, torn photographs, brittle letters, faded postcards, was a fragment of a story she barely understood, but desperately wanted to piece together. Hours passed as she crawled beneath beds and behind heavy furniture, lifting rugs and tapping at loose floorboards. The house creaked and sighed around her, as if watching silently, waiting for her to uncover its truths. Her arms grew tired, and the ache in her swollen belly deepened, but her resolve did not waver. One afternoon, as a storm rolled in, the wind rattling the windows and rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, Emily's fingers brushed against something cold and metallic beneath a loose floorboard near the fireplace. Heart-pounding, she pried it free. A small, ornate key, its surface tarnished but intact. A flicker of hope sparked within her as she cradled the key, its weight solid and real in her palm. The house seemed to exhale with her, the air shifting lighter somehow. She rose unsteadily, clutching the key as if it were a lifeline, and made her way to the basement door. The lock gave way with a reluctant click, the door creaking open to reveal a narrow staircase descending into shadows. A chill rolled up from the depths, carrying the scent of damp earth and forgotten years. Emily hesitated at the threshold, the unknown stretching before her like a dark river. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, the wooden stairs groaning beneath her cautious weight. The light from the house above was swallowed quickly by the darkness below, and she fumbled for her phone, switching on the flashlight to cast a narrow beam ahead. The basement was a cavernous space, walls of rough stone and mortar lined with wooden beams that sagged under the weight of time. Dust hung thick in the air, disturbed only by the faint scurrying of unseen creatures. Boxes and crates were stacked against the walls, their surfaces mottled with mold and age. Emily's light swept across the room, revealing remnants of a life long past. Old furniture draped in tattered sheets, rusted tools, and a collection of trunks and chests, their locks broken or missing. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft drip of water from somewhere unseen. She moved slowly, her footsteps echoing faintly as she approached a large wooden chest in the corner. Its iron hinges were rusted, and the wood bore deep scratches, but it was intact. Emily knelt beside it, fingers trembling as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a trove of items carefully wrapped in yellowed cloth. Photographs, letters, and a stack of journals, their leather covers cracked but preserved. Her breath caught as she unfolded a letter, the handwriting delicate and precise, dated nearly a century ago. The words spoke of struggle and hope, a story of a woman named Mabel, the great-aunt she had barely known, who had lived in this very house. The letters hinted at secrets kept beneath the floorboards, a life marked by hardship and resilience in a time long past. As Emily read on, she felt a connection growing, a bridge spanning the decades between her and the woman who had left this legacy behind. The journals promised more, whispering of hidden truths and untold stories waiting to be uncovered. Despite the chill and the shadowed gloom, Emily felt a warmth blossoming inside her, a sense of purpose that had been absent for too long. The basement, once a place of mystery and fear, had become a gateway to understanding, a link to her heritage and the strength that had come before. She gathered a few of the journals and letters, tucking them carefully into her bag. The house creaked around her, as if acknowledging the discovery, the walls seeming to breathe with newfound life. Emily knew the path ahead would be difficult, but with each secret uncovered, the house was becoming less a place of loneliness and more a home filled with stories waiting to be told. As she ascended the stairs, the weight of the journals in her bag was a comforting presence. The locked basement door closed softly behind her, but the mysteries it contained were no longer hidden in darkness. They were part of her now, a legacy to carry forward. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening beneath a pale sun. Emily stepped onto the porch, the cool air filling her lungs. The house, with all its secrets and shadows, was no longer just a refuge. It was a beginning. The journals and letters from the basement rested on the rickety kitchen table, their worn leather covers cracked and softened by time. Emily sat in the fading afternoon light, tracing the delicate handwriting with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Each page whispered fragments of a lifelong past, stories etched in ink that had survived decades of silence. The faded diary belonged to Mabel, her great-aunt, whose name had surfaced only recently in the lawyer's letter. As Emily turned the brittle pages, she was drawn into a world that felt both distant and intimately familiar. A world of secrets, struggle, and quiet defiance. Mabel's words spoke of a life shadowed by hardship. She had lived in this very house, tending to its rooms and grounds with a fierce determination. But beneath the surface, the journal revealed darker truths. A marriage marked by control and fear, whispers of betrayal, and a desire to break free from the chains that bound her. One entry caught Emily's breath. Mabel wrote of an escape plan, a hidden compartment within the house that held documents proving her innocence and exposing the deceit of those who sought to claim her family's land. The words were hurried, penned with urgency and fear, but also with hope. A hope that the truth would one day emerge from the shadows. Emily's fingers trembled as she read, the weight of Mabel's story settling heavily on her heart. The parallels between their lives were uncanny. Two women facing uncertainty, fighting to protect their futures against forces beyond their control. It was as if Mabel's courage had been passed down through the years, waiting to be awakened. Determined to find the hidden compartment, Emily began a careful search of the house, examining every corner and crevice with fresh eyes. The faded wallpaper peeled back in places, revealing uneven plaster and faint outlines of what might have once been secret spaces. Floorboards creaked underfoot as she probed for loose panels or hidden hinges. Her search led her back to the basement, where the air was thick with dust and the scent of forgotten years. Among the clutter, she discovered a loose floorboard near the far wall, its edges worn smooth by time. With effort, she pried it up, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside lay a weathered leather pouch, its surface cracked and softened. Emily's heart pounded as she lifted it out, untying the frayed cord that sealed it. Within were yellowed papers, maps, legal documents, and letters that spoke of land ownership, fraudulent claims, and evidence of a battle fought in courtrooms long ago. The documents told a tale of deception and greed, implicating a powerful family who had sought to wrest control of the property from Mabel's ancestors. The evidence was damning, a testament to the injustice that had shaped the history of the house and the town itself. Emily sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of the discovery. The house was more than a shelter. It was a repository of truth, a silent witness to a legacy of resilience and resistance. She felt the presence of Mabel beside her, a steady strength guiding her through the uncertainty. As days turned to weeks, Emily dedicated herself to unraveling the threads of the past. She cross-referenced names and dates, piecing together the story behind the documents. The deeper she delved, the clearer it became that Mabel had fought not only for her family's land, but for justice in a community that had long been silenced. The discovery also stirred something within the town. Emily's cautious inquiries led her to local archives and conversations with elders who remembered whispers of the old disputes. The house, once seen as a relic of decay, began to pulse with renewed significance. Yet, the path forward was not without challenges. The powerful family implicated in the documents still held sway in Millersfield, their influence casting long shadows over the community. Emily sensed resistance beneath polite smiles and guarded words, a subtle warning that the past was not easily unearthed. Despite the unease, Emily found unexpected allies, neighbors who offered stories, support, and encouragement. One such ally was Claire, an elderly woman whose family had lived in Millersfield for generations. Claire's eyes shone with recognition as she listened to Emily's findings, recalling tales passed down about the land disputes and the quiet courage of Mabel. Together, they combed through records and pieced together a narrative that bridged past and present. The house, once a symbol of loss, was becoming a beacon of truth and hope. Emily often returned to the basement, the hidden compartment now a sacred space where history breathed anew. The journals, letters, and documents were carefully cataloged and preserved, each piece a thread in the tapestry of a family's enduring spirit. As she worked, Emily felt the weight of her own story intertwining with Mabel's. The house was no longer a place of shadows and silence, but a living testament to the strength found in facing adversity. It was a sanctuary where past and future converged, where a mother-to-be could find courage in the footsteps of those who came before. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with hues of amber and rose, Emily sat by the window, the soft glow illuminating the pages spread before her. The house hummed with quiet life, the walls holding memories and promises alike. She placed a gentle hand on her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of the child within. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges both old and new. But Emily was no longer alone. The legacy of Mabel and the stories unearthed in the basement had woven a new foundation of strength beneath her feet. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Emily allowed herself a moment of peace. The house, the journals, the hidden truths, they were all part of a path forward, a beginning woven from the resilience of those who had come before and the hope of those yet to come. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, both exhausting and invigorating. Emily found herself caught between the physical demands of her advancing pregnancy and the laborious task of breathing life back into the old house. Every creak of the floorboards and groan of the walls was a reminder of the precariousness of her situation. And yet, with every small victory, she felt a growing resolve. Cleaning the house was no easy feat. Dust and grime had settled into every nook and cranny, and years of neglect had allowed nature to reclaim parts of the interior. Emily spent hours scrubbing wallpaper edges, sweeping thick layers of dust from floorboards, and tackling the stubborn stains in the kitchen sink. Her hands grew raw, her back ached, and often she found herself sitting quietly, breathing through the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm her. Balancing the effort with her pregnancy was a delicate dance. Some days, the exhaustion was so profound that she could hardly lift her arms. Other days, the sharp twinges reminded her to slow down. But the house demanded care, and Emily was determined not to let it fall further into ruin, not when it held so much promise. Her efforts did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, as she wrestled with a jammed window, a knock came at the door. Emily opened it to find Mark, the local handyman, standing on the porch. He was a sturdy man, with kind eyes and a weathered smile. Someone who seemed to belong naturally to the rhythms of the town. "I heard you were fixing up the old place," he said, nodding toward the house. "Thought I might lend a hand if you need it." Relieved and grateful, Emily welcomed the offer. Mark's presence brought a steady, reassuring rhythm to the work. Together, they tackled stubborn repairs, patching broken panes, oiling creaky hinges, and reinforcing weakened floorboards. His knowledge of the house's quirks was invaluable, and his easy manner helped ease some of the loneliness that had settled around Emily since her arrival. Their partnership grew naturally, marked by shared silences and small talks about the town, the seasons, and the history embedded in the walls around them. Mark listened patiently as Emily spoke of Mabel's journals and the secrets she had uncovered, his interest genuine. He offered insights about local families and old rumors, filling in gaps that the dusty documents could not. One afternoon, after a morning spent clearing the overgrown garden, Mark helped Emily move a heavy trunk from the basement to the kitchen. The trunk, once locked and mysterious, now lay open, its contents cataloged and carefully preserved. Together, they sifted through the papers and photographs, piecing together more fragments of Mabel's story. Their work eventually led them to the safe mentioned in Mabel's diary, a heavy iron box concealed behind a false panel in the study. The safe was rusted shut, its lock stubbornly resisting their efforts for days. Emily's fingers trembled with anticipation each time they tried the combination, a code hinted at in a faded letter. Finally, with a satisfying click, The safe yielded. Inside lay more documents, deeds, legal papers, and correspondence that deepened the story of land disputes and personal sacrifices. Among them was a letter addressed to Emily herself, written in Mabel's shaky handwriting, urging her to protect the truth and carry the family legacy forward. The discovery was both exhilarating and daunting. The evidence was powerful, but it also held the potential to stir conflict. Emily knew that revealing these truths might unsettle the delicate balance of the town and draw unwanted attention. Yet, the weight of silence felt heavier still. As the days shortened and autumn crept in, Emily found moments of quiet joy in small victories. An evening spent restoring a broken window, a meal shared with Mark on the porch, the gentle flutter of movement from within her belly. These moments grounded her, reminding her of the life she was nurturing alongside the house's revival. But the challenges persisted. The physical toll of pregnancy grew more pronounced. And there were nights when Emily lay awake, heart pounding with worry. The emotional strain of the discoveries weighed on her, mingling with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Still, she pressed on, drawing strength from the legacy she had uncovered and the support that had begun to surround her. The house, once a symbol of abandonment, was transforming into a home, a place of history, hope, and resilience. One crisp morning, as frost kissed the edges of the garden, Emily and Mark stood surveying the progress. The house looked different now, cleaner, sturdier, alive with quiet promise. The locked basement door, the journals, the safe, all had become parts of a story she was determined to tell. Mark smiled, his breath visible in the cold air. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "This place, it's more than a house now. It's a home." Emily nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle within her. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer faced it alone. With each step, with every discovery, she was weaving a tapestry of strength that would carry her and her child forward. Rooted in the past, reaching toward the future. The crisp air of early autumn carried with it a subtle tension, one Emily could feel like a weight pressing against her skin. The discovery of the documents and the revelations about the land disputes had stirred something far beyond the walls of the old house. Whispers traveled through the town with the wind, carrying rumors that unsettled the quiet streets of Millersfield. It began with a knock at the door one morning, a man in a tailored suit, his expression polite but firm. He introduced himself as an agent of a local developer, a powerful figure with deep roots in the town's affairs. His words were measured but clear. "Miss Carter, I hear you've come across some old documents regarding this property. It would be in everyone's best interest if you considered selling the house quietly, without making waves." Emily's heart tightened as she listened, the polite admonition veiling a threat she could not ignore. She felt a surge of defiance rising within her, determination to protect the legacy uncovered in the basement, the truth that Mabel had fought to preserve. The agent's visits became more frequent, each encounter laced with increasing pressure. Letters arrived, subtle warnings cloaked in legal jargon, and neighbors who once greeted Emily with cautious curiosity now offered cold smiles or averted gazes. It was clear that the developer's influence was far-reaching, weaving a web that threatened to ensnare her. But Emily was no longer the isolated woman who had arrived months before. The discoveries in the house had connected her to a community of quiet strength. She reached out to Claire, the elderly neighbor whose family had long history in Millersfield, and to Mark, whose steady support had become a cornerstone in her daily life. Together, they began gathering information, piecing together the extent of the corruption that had allowed the powerful to manipulate land ownership and silence dissent. The documents from the basement became vital evidence, a tangible link to the injustices that had shaped the town's history. Emily also sought out a young lawyer named Thomas Reed, whose reputation for integrity and tenacity was whispered about in small-town circles. Thomas listened carefully as Emily laid out the story: the discovery of the journals, the hidden safe, the fraudulent deeds, and he agreed to help her navigate the legal complexities that lay ahead. The decision to fight back was not made lightly. Emily understood the risks: the developers' resources, the potential backlash from a town hesitant to confront its past, and the strain the battle would place on her already fragile health. But the weight of silence and surrender was heavier still. As the days grew shorter and the chill of approaching winter settled in, Emily and her allies prepared for the confrontation. They organized meetings with other residents who had suffered under the developers' influence, gathering testimonies and support. The house, once a place of solitary struggle, became a hub of quiet resistance. Emily found strength in the community's solidarity and in the legacy of Mabel's courage. The parallels between their stories were no longer mere coincidences, but a shared narrative of resilience against oppression. Each document uncovered, each story told, was a step toward reclaiming justice. The legal battle began with mounting tensions. The developers' lawyers filed motions to dismiss the claims, attempting to undermine the authenticity of the documents and discredit Emily's efforts. Yet, with Thomas's guidance, they countered with thorough research and compelling evidence. Throughout the process, Emily faced moments of doubt and exhaustion. The physical toll of pregnancy, combined with the emotional strain, tested her limits. But the support around her, Mark's steady presence, Claire's wisdom, Thomas's legal expertise, and the community's encouragement, fortified her resolve. One evening, as snowflakes began to drift softly outside the window, Emily sat reviewing the case files, the weight of the fight pressing down but tempered by a quiet hope. The house around her, once silent and forgotten, now echoed with the voices of those who refused to let history be erased. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges both old and new. Yet, Emily knew that this battle was about more than property. It was about reclaiming a legacy, honoring the truth, and building a future where justice could take root. With determination steadying her breath, she rose and looked out into the night, the house standing firm against the dark. The fight was just beginning, but Emily was ready to face it. One step, one breath, one unwavering heartbeat at a time. The courthouse loomed before Emily like a fortress, its stone steps worn smooth by the footsteps of countless battles fought within its walls. The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the murmurs of a town that had gathered in hushed curiosity and quiet anticipation. Inside, the weight of history and justice hung heavy, a solemn reminder of the stakes at hand. Emily stood just beyond the courtroom doors, her hands resting lightly on her swollen belly, grounding herself against the tide of nerves that threatened to overwhelm. Beside her, Thomas Reed adjusted his tie, his face a mixture of calm determination and cautious optimism. Mark and Claire flanked them, silent pillars of support, their eyes reflecting the gravity of the moment. The trial was set to begin, a culmination of months of painstaking preparation and tireless effort. The evidence collected from the basement, the journals, the hidden documents, the forged deeds, was on the table, a tangible thread weaving the past into the present. Yet, the opposition was formidable. Harrison Blackwood, the developer and scion of the family implicated in the fraud, sat across the courtroom, his expression cold and unyielding. The opening statements set the tone. Blackwood's attorneys painted Emily's claims as baseless, dismissing the documents as forgeries and casting doubt on her motives. They portrayed the house as a mere relic, unworthy of preservation or serious contention. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, the tension palpable. Thomas rose with measured confidence, presenting the evidence with clarity and conviction. He spoke of Mabel's courage, the injustices she had endured, and the community's right to truth and justice. The documents were meticulously examined, their authenticity backed by expert testimony. Witnesses from the town recounted stories passed down, lending voice to the silenced past. Emily listened intently, her heart pounding with each revelation. The legal jargon and procedural formalities blurred, replaced by a singular focus on the legacy she fought to protect. The courtroom became a battleground not just of law, but of history, memory, and identity. Midway through the proceedings, a pivotal moment arrived. A local historian called to the stand testified to the legitimacy of the documents and the long-standing rumors of land manipulation by the Blackwood family. His detailed knowledge of town records and archives strengthened Emily's case, casting a new light on the shadows of the past. Blackwood's legal team responded with fierce cross-examinations, seeking to undermine the credibility of witnesses and discredit the evidence. The courtroom was charged with a palpable tension, each exchange a test of endurance and resolve. Throughout the trial, Mark remained by Emily's side, offering quiet encouragement and practical support. His familiarity with the house and the town proved invaluable, providing context and insights that enriched their case. Claire's presence in the gallery was a steady reminder of community solidarity, her eyes shining with pride and hope. Outside the courtroom, the town watched with bated breath. The case had ignited conversations and stirred emotions long buried. Local newspapers covered the proceedings, and neighbors whispered in doorways and cafes. The house on the hill was no longer forgotten. It was a symbol of resistance and reclamation. As the trial wore on, Emily felt the strain of the fight deepen. The physical demands of her pregnancy intertwined with the emotional toll of the courtroom battles. Yet, with each day, her resolve hardened. She was not just fighting for a house, but for a future built on truth and justice. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, Thomas approached her with a cautious smile. "We've managed to delay the eviction," he said quietly. "There's still work to do, but this is a victory." Relief washed over Emily, mingling with exhaustion and renewed determination. The path ahead remained uncertain, but the tide was turning. That evening, back in the sanctuary of the old house, Emily sat by the window, the journals and documents spread before her like a map of hope and history. The house creaked softly, as if breathing alongside her, alive with stories waiting to be told. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movement of the life within, a quiet promise of new beginnings. The courtroom battles were far from over, but Emily knew she was no longer alone. The legacy of Mabel, the strength of the community, and the love surrounding her had become a shield and a beacon. In the face of adversity, Emily found a fierce, unyielding hope, a determination to see justice served and a home preserved. As night fell over Millersfield, the house stood resilient against the dark, a testament to the past and a promise for the future. Emily closed her eyes, ready to face whatever came next, one step, one breath at a time. The courtroom was alive with a quiet intensity as the judge's gavel struck the bench, signaling the start of the final day of hearings. Emily sat at the plaintiff's table, her fingers intertwined, steady despite the flutter of nerves beneath her calm exterior. The months of legal wrangling, the sleepless nights, and the emotional toll had brought her to this moment. a moment where the truth she had fought so hard to reveal would finally stand before the law. Thomas Reed, her young lawyer, was poised and confident, ready to present the culmination of their case. Across the room, Harrison Blackwood's attorneys exchanged glances, their earlier confidence tempered by the weight of mounting evidence and community support that had shifted the tide irrevocably. The courtroom filled with townspeople who had gathered to witness the proceedings. Their faces bore the marks of history, some hopeful, some weary, but all invested in the outcome that would ripple far beyond the walls of this chamber. Claire sat in the front row, her eyes bright with pride, while Mark stood quietly near the back, a steady presence amidst the tension. Thomas began by recounting the journey that had brought them here. Mabel's hidden journals, the basement compartment, and the damning documents exposing the fraudulent land claims. He emphasized the courage it took to unearth these truths and the injustice that had been perpetrated against Emily's family and the community. One by one, witnesses took the stand. The local historian's testimony was reinforced by additional evidence from town records, legal experts, and residents who recounted the long shadow cast by the Blackwood family's influence. Each voice added weight, weaving a tapestry of truth that no legal maneuvering could easily unravel. Blackwood's defense attempted to poke holes, but the foundation was solid. The judge listened intently, the air thick with the gravity of justice in motion. Emily watched as her story, once buried beneath layers of silence and fear, unfolded with clarity and strength. When Thomas rested his case, the courtroom held its breath. The defense counsel's closing arguments were impassioned, but ultimately fell short against the undeniable evidence and heartfelt testimonies. The judge's expression remained unreadable as the case moved into deliberation. Outside, the town waited with bated breath, the weight of history pressing on their collective shoulders. For Emily, the hours stretched endlessly, her thoughts a whirlwind of hope and apprehension. The life growing within her stirred gently, a quiet heartbeat echoing resilience. Finally, the courtroom doors opened, and the judge returned, the weight of decision evident in his measured steps. He spoke with solemn authority, acknowledging the depth of evidence and the courage displayed. The ruling was clear. The land rights were restored to Emily's family, and the eviction orders were rescinded. A wave of relief and quiet jubilation swept through the courtroom. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she looked to Thomas, whose smile was one of quiet triumph. Claire's hands clasped hers tightly, and Mark's nod was firm and steady. The house, the legacy, and the community's voice had prevailed. Returning to the old Victorian home that afternoon, Emily felt the air shift. The walls seemed to breathe with a newfound vitality, the dust and shadows giving way to light and possibility. The garden, once wild and untamed, held the promise of renewal, mirroring the rebirth taking place within the house and within herself. As she moved through the rooms, Emily imagined the life that could be built here, a life grounded in truth, justice, and belonging. The journals and documents, once relics of the past, were now cherished treasures, guiding her toward a future shaped by resilience and hope. In the days that followed, neighbors reached out with congratulations and offers of help. The community, once fractured by fear and silence, began to heal, united by the shared triumph over injustice. Emily found herself embraced by a circle of support that extended beyond the walls of her home. Preparing for the arrival of her child, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been arduous, marked by loss and uncertainty, but it had also been one of discovery and strength. The house was no longer just a shelter. It was a symbol of endurance and belonging. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of amber and gold, Emily sat on the porch, the journals open beside her. The warm breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. She cradled her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of life within, a living testament to the journey she had undertaken. The house, the legacy of Mabel, and the community's unwavering support had woven together a new chapter, one filled with hope, justice, and the promise of tomorrow. Emily smiled softly, ready to embrace the future with open arms, her heart full and her spirit unbroken. A year had passed since the courtroom's solemn ruling, and the Victorian house at the edge of Millersfield had transformed into a vibrant home, alive with laughter, light, and memories in the making. The faded wallpaper had been replaced with fresh paint in warm hues, the creaky floorboards repaired and polished until they gleamed beneath soft rugs. The garden, once a tangled wilderness, bloomed with vibrant flowers and carefully tended vegetables, a testament to renewed life and care. Emily stood on the porch, her eyes tracing the familiar contours of the house she now called home. Beside her, a small child toddled unsteadily across the wooden floor, his bright eyes wide with wonder at the world around him. The baby she had carried through trials and uncertainty was now a living symbol of hope and new beginnings. The house pulsed with the rhythm of family. Quiet mornings filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and warm bread, afternoons spent in the sun-dappled garden, evenings where stories were shared by the fireplace. It was a sanctuary born not only of brick and mortar, but of resilience and love. Emily often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The loss, the discoveries, the battles fought in dim courtrooms and shadowed basements. The journals she had uncovered, once fragile relics, now sat proudly on a shelf alongside photographs and mementos, a bridge between past and present. In the garden, a small grove of trees had been planted, each sapling a living memorial to Mabel Whitman, the woman whose courage had laid the foundation for their new life. Claire and Mark had joined Emily in the planting ceremony, their hands steady as they placed the young trees into the earth, their roots intertwining like the stories and struggles they honored. The community that had once watched from a distance had drawn closer, drawn by the story of justice and restoration. Neighbors stopped by with baskets of homegrown produce, invitations to gatherings, and offers of friendship. Emily found herself woven into the fabric of Millersfield, no longer an outsider, but a cherished member of its unfolding story. One sunny afternoon, Emily sat with Thomas Reed, the lawyer whose tenacity had guided her through the legal battles. They spoke quietly on the porch, the breeze carrying the scent of blossoms and fresh earth. Thomas smiled, his eyes reflecting the satisfaction of a fight well fought. "You've done more than reclaim a house," he said softly. "You've restored a legacy for yourself, your child, and this community." Emily nodded, her heart full. The hardships had not been in vain. They had forged a path toward belonging and purpose. The child in her arms gurgled happily, reaching out to grasp a leaf fluttering in the wind. As dusk settled, painting the sky in shades of pink and lavender, Emily stood once more at the edge of the garden, the grove of trees swaying gently. She whispered a quiet thanks to Mabel, to the ancestors whose stories had carried her through darkness, the house, the land, the community. They were no longer fractured fragments, but a tapestry of hope, resilience, and renewal. Emily felt the steady pulse of life around her, a symphony of past and present, strength and grace. With a deep breath, she stepped forward into the evening, ready to embrace the future with open arms and an unshakable spirit. The journey had been long and winding, but it had led her home, to a place of love, justice, and the enduring promise of tomorrow.